this video, we're going to talk about how to do a very simple statistical task in R. The reason for this is a lot of times when people are new to programming, they see all the little structures, the for loops, the while loops, storing values and variables, and it's not obvious why anybody would ever need to do those things, and so in this video, I want to just show one thing that could be done using a bunch of smaller structures, walk you through the structures, why they're used. Oh, sorry about that. But you'll be able to see how these could all be put together in order to create an application that is somewhat useful. Now, this is not how I would suggest you we'll be creating a function to find averages. This isn't how I would suggest you actually find an average in R, but this will give you an idea of how a bunch of smaller pieces can be used in R to do something useful. Before we start, because this is sort of for people who are new to programming, you could probably just go ahead to the other videos if you know some other programming language. This might not be too helpful for you. The first thing that we're going to do in order to find the average of a set of numbers is we're going to create a function. Okay, so we'll call this function my function. Normally, you'd probably want to call it like average or something. And then in this variable, we will store a function. Okay, now within these parentheses, in order to declare a function, we say function, and then we have parentheses, and then all the inputs that are going to go into the functions. These will be called arguments. And for this, we only need a list of numbers. In order to find an average, you just need a list of numbers. We'll just put my list. Okay, and then when we create a function, remember a function is just a piece of code that does something, and it gives a value. So when we create a function, we will put the doing part within these curly braces. So what we tell it to do with the arguments will go within the curly braces. Okay, so we have a list. The first thing we're going to want to do is get a sum of everything in the list. So we'll say my sum. Now this is creating a variable within the function. This variable, once the function's done executing, the code can't get it. So this will just be a variable that's only used when the function is running. And we'll put the number 0 within this variable called my sum. Then we'll go through each and every number in the list of numbers, and we'll add that number to my sum. So to do that, we'll use a for loop. So for, open and close parentheses. So this is a structure that goes through everything in a list, right? So for thing in my list. So this says create a variable called thing every time we go through something in this list, and it will be just the next thing in the list. And we'll have some more curly braces, and we'll tell it what to do. So what it'll do is it'll say my sum will now be whatever my sum was plus thing. So that number that's going through this time around. And then we will use a close curly braces, and that'll say go through my list every time you get to a number, add it to my sum. So by the time this is done, my sum will be the total. And then we will tell it the average. So we'll say average. We'll create the average by taking my sum and divide it by the number of things in the list. So this is a function called length, and it's the number of things in the list, right? And then the final thing we'll do in this function is we'll say we want the result, the end result of this function, result, to be the average, right? I'm going to use closing curly braces to end the function. Okay, now we have a function, right? It's called my function. If we were to want to use this function, what we would do is we would create a variable to put the average in. We'll say my average. And in it, we'll put, we'll call my function. So we'll put the name of the function, open and close parentheses, and in it, we'll put a list of numbers. To do that, we use a C function. So C, open and close parentheses, and do 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, now we have an average here. It's 2. And we could print out print my average. Right, and it'll print it out to the screen. So what we've done here is we've created a bit of code that can be recycled anytime we need an average in this session. As long as we have this code in it, we can call this function and get the average. Okay, so some useful structures we have here are we've got functions, we've got for loops, we've obviously got assigning to variables, we've got incrementing variables, so my sum is my sum plus something else. So we can, this is not like an algebraic equation where you have blank equals blank plus blank, and you can't have something that's essentially unsolvable here. If this were a variable, you wouldn't want constant, non-zero constant here and the same variable on both sides. So it's not like an algebraic equation, it's assignment. So we can assign an increased value to a variable. And we have the length function and result right here. So this is a lot like a return value in a different scripting language, right? And you could say we could give it a totally different set of numbers. Oh, sorry. Yay, didn't use the C function. There we go. Right, you could give it a totally different set of numbers. You know, reuse the same code with different inputs and get different outputs. So you should be able to see here with how we're treating, with how we're using the code, these same elements could be put together to do all sorts of mathematical and statistical operations. So hopefully it gives you perspective of why you're learning these smaller structures and helps you as we move on. And we go through the specifics of a large number of structures you can use in your code.